Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion of the good old US of A. I am Charles York.
Darth Calhoun.
Leon Koldevsky.
Prussian Dixie.
Mr. William Stout.
I am Victor Smith, and last but most certainly not least, we have decided to bring this guy back, Charles Coulombe.
Era is counted and accounted for, more or less.
Yes. So this is our anniversary episode where we have extended an invitation to everyone who was on the podcast previously. Well, I say we; it was really me. Where I've extended an invitation to everyone who was on the podcast previously to make an appearance. Although because we are recording this a little earlier than normal, that probably will not happen. But hey, maybe next year. So this episode is going to kind of follow our typical fun episode format, where I have a series of questions for our panel here, and we will. I want to organize them from most serious to fun, because hopefully we all develop a little bit of on-air fatigue, and when you're tired, everything becomes funny. At least that's my experience. But let's see. So, with that being said, let's start with our first question. What was the most difficult Okay, so I should have
English is a language.
I should have included Charles stumbling on the bingo there, because that's another thing that I like to do often. And for those of you playing on YouTube, there should be a link to bingo in your description. Let's see. What was the most difficult argument against monarchy for you to overcome before you became a monarchist? You know, the one that gave you the most, trouble. So, I guess we'll just do the normal thing where it goes in order of my screen, of the order of the people. So that would be Prussian. And remember, these people do not know this ahead of time unless they propose the question, but he didn't. So.
Okay, first things first. I don't know why I'm first on this, because even for me it shows that. I thought it would be alphabetical, but fine. I'll go first.
It's color coordinated. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just throwing. You never.
Maybe it is. Who knows?
You never know with these things. You know, it's
really don't.
Twitter does something arbitrary. You just shut up and accept it. Discord does something arbitrary. It's just the way it is. Okay. Yeah. Great. Continue.
Okay. So the question was, what was the hardest argument for you to overcome to become a monarchist? Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm honestly not sure, because the reasoning I really became a monarchist kind of stemmed from the fact of my own personal heritage to the house of LII, and so I'm not sure. I guess the hardest part was probably just my parents, though, because both my parents, even though my dad is like direct descendant of the house of LII, he still was like kind of like hardcore American Republican. So I don't know.
Just so we all have a sense of who the House of LII is, could you provide an explanation?
So the House of LII, there's like 4 different branches of that house. It's a minor German noble house, like all sorts of different parts of Germany, in like near Hanover, Saxony, in Westphalia, different parts of mostly just northern Germany, roughly. And there's 4 separate houses. The branch I'm a part of is the House of Weisenfeld. And yeah, that's basically my house. We also, one of the House of Detmold, LII Detmold, was also overthrown in the revolution of.
Which one? There was a lot of them.
1848.
1918.
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah. Then the whole empire.
Schaumburg-Lippe.
Yes, I am related to them.
I had to
as well as the guy who married Queen Juliana of the Netherlands.
Were you invited to the wedding?
I wasn't even born yet.
Oh.
Lippe Biesterfeld, Prince Bernhard.
Yeah, Biesterfeld, yeah, Prince Bernhard. Or sometimes I just jokingly call him, oh yeah, it's cousin Bernard.
That's a beastly branch of the family.
Yeah, I'm just the Weisenfeld branch. We're like the quiet ones.
All right. So I guess Darth, and I suspect this answer is going to be a little similar to Prussian because of, well, I'll let you speak.
So I mean, yeah, most of my family are normie Republicans, even though we also descend from Bavarian aristocracy, specifically very, very low level. Like we weren't a great house. But I just had this primordial feeling that democracy and democratic forms of government were always a sham, that something was always going on and nothing appeared as it is. I always had more admiration for like great men of history and great autocrats. So I kind of had this inclination since I was a child to approve of men like say the various emperors and great monarchs of the past and some dictators when I was a kid because I didn't know like the difference between a monarch and a dictator when I was a child. And as I just grew in age and evolved, like I was pushed into normie Republican circles mostly by my father and the rest of my family. But then as I intellectually developed, I started to understand Catholicism was frankly a monarchical religion. That if Christ is going to be King of Kings, where are the kings mentality? And that monarchy is the most natural form of government for man and all should be subject to it, and there shouldn't be a godless republic on this earth ever again.
The I think the question was more, what was the toughest argument for you to overcome?
I mean, the only argument that I ever like face whenever I reveal that like I'm a monarchist, like I had to take a political science class recently, and I said I was a monarchist, and of course the first question was, well, who would be the monarch of America? And I honestly said I don't believe that there's truly anybody worthy currently living in America that I know of that'd be a monarchical figure to take a throne like that and to truly take on the responsibility of being a monarch.
The most repetitive and just teeth gnashing question we keep getting. It's so predictable that everyone is going to ask that question, but that doesn't stop it from being so irritatingly annoying.
Oh yes, on Reddit r/monarchism, they had to that question kept getting asked every 5 minutes, and they had to. And they, I think that it may be a rule now that says you can't ask that question.
They literally started throwing out American monarchists just because they wouldn't stop asking that question repetitively. That's the entire reason we had to make our own subreddit.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I have a. I mean, I even had it down to a formula of this is what how I would answer that question. But it's eh,
It's
the days of that are over, as all things must. Let's see. So, I guess I'm next up. If Darth I think you said all you wanted to, right?
More or less.
Okay. Um, so for me, even though I came up with this question, I don't necessarily think I have an answer because I can't remember, even though this only happened a couple of years ago. I can't necessarily remember a single moment of ascent to monarchism. It was just gradually seeing, because this was during the whole 2020 thing. I think that played a whole. I think subconsciously that played a part in it, seeing our Republican institutions sort of struggle to support themselves. Um, but the whole what's to stop a monarch from being a tyrant sort of thing. And I think how I answered that, internally is it's not just take our current leadership and give them a new give one of them a new job description with more power, because in a monarchy, the way a monarch is brought up is very different from a way that a republican gains power, and that monarch would be taught about the faith and what his obligation is, and so there's less of a risk of that happening, and that historically, even absolute monarchs have never wielded as much power as hypothetically the president could wield, and kind of does wield. So I think that's how I answer that question. Um,
Right. So the most difficult argument for me to sort of look at is the argument of, I guess, practicality speaking for current era. I had to sort of be taught that current era is not exactly a good argument against something. So, yeah, and of course, what you saw was sort of a subconscious leaning toward assent. 2020 election was that, like, just, I suppose Oprah Winfrey would call it an aha moment.
Hmm. I mean, the current they've been making like the current day argument for like centuries now to get rid of monarchy. And really, I make this argument back to them. Does human nature truly change? Like, you can go back and read Plato and Aristotle, and what they've written back then is still, like, it's not outdated. It's still very applicable to all of humanity and the understanding of human nature. So, the understanding that, oh, with different times, you must change your style of regime, like, that's just a dead argument because human nature fundamentally does not change.
Of course, there's always the counter argument that the Roman Republic is just as old, if not older, than most modern monarchies are today.
Well, yes, but the Roman Republic overthrew a Roman monarchy that had.
And also, the Roman Republic was an aristocratic republic. Like the Senate, they were all aristocrats. They weren't like a democratic form of government by any stretch of the imagination.
All right. So Leon is the next on the list.
I mean, I guess for me, I kind of got like my thoughts ran along with Charles Yoke, and it's like, how do we have a monarch that walks, that he does stuff, he's not useless like the Queen of England, but how do we prevent him from becoming a absolute military dictator? That's what I had to find personally, and for me, I mean, I came to my own conclusions on how the government should be structured, in which the monarch has power, but it's not an absolute ruler like a dictator or the current U.S. president.
All right. Will?
I don't know. I think my biggest challenge was basically the cultural challenge. Like, in the US, we have this staunch Republican attitude, this staunch anti monarchist mythos, and my biggest challenge was overcoming, how can you be American and be monarchist? And our revolution was against the monarchy, is that basically spitting in the eye of everything America was built on kind of argument. Basically, people
So,
to legitimize my beliefs by stating the fact that I'm an American and an American shouldn't believe that.
yeah, I can. I have a very good counter argument to that. To be an American citizen only requires you to be born in America. You didn't sign up to believe the things that are prescribed to you in this nation. And supposedly we have freedom of consciousness and freedom of expression. So you don't have to conform to the ideas of the American Revolution to be an American. You can just simply be born here and you're American.
And of course, then there's the secondary comment that you hear a lot of times in politics. It's like, if you like those systems so much, then why don't you move to a different country that has that system?
Because
There's
I
also
like
a
this
really good
one, I want to
argument.
fix it.
But there's also a really good argument against that. It's like, am I a citizen in any other nation besides America? I cannot simply just become a resident of another nation. Like that is it's not like you're coming over the boat like in America where it's like where we had Ellis Island where if you met the requirements you can come in and be a resident and then become a citizen. Like most countries don't have a system like that.
Yeah.
I'll also say that add on here, there's not really any other country on the planet that's like all version of like what a monarchy should be. I mean, it's either an absolute Islamic kind of dictatorship like Saudi Arabia, or it's like Britain and Sweden, where the monarch is absolutely useless and just excluded from the political side of things completely.
I would say the closest thing would be like a Liechtenstein situation, but of course Liechtenstein is tiny and they're not going to accept some random American.
Yeah, you already had to if you have somebody visiting them, they had to physically move the furniture over so there's enough space. It's
Mr.
well,
Coulombe?
Well, actually, my problem was very much like Will's, our esteemed Vice Chancellor, in the sense that, well, I had two different things going on at once, as you might say, as a boy. On the one hand, I'm French Canadian on my dad's side, and I was very much aware, number one, of the place of the Bourbon in bringing my fathers to Canada. Very Jacobite too, because we had a thread of Scots blood on my dad's side. My mother was very pro-Habsburg. And I was also aware that the revolution had been partly fought against the Quebec Act, which was not happy-making. That's all on the one side. You might say that's what prepared me not to be prejudiced against monarchy. But, I was a Boy Scout and very patriotic, love my country and all that. And the argument, well, the United States are the creation of a Republican revolution, presented me with a quandary. And at different times in my life, I dealt with it differently. My first reaction was to, as it were, look at the Constitution as being a sort of mute monarch. And in truth, the Constitution plays the same role in American politics that the Queen does in the Commonwealth. I mean that in both senses. And over time, I began to realize too, I'd always thought the American Revolution was kind of a sham. And, you can't grow up reading Washington Irving and Cooper and people like that. And Cooper, of course, was very much for the revolutionaries, but I couldn't help rooting for the British. So long and the short of it was that I came in time to realize that, number one, our country's roots are in fact monarchical. They're varied. We do not have a single monarchical tradition in our country. I was born in a city that was founded by the Dutch, ruled by the English. I descended from French colonists. And we moved when I was a kid to California, and there were the works of the kings of Spain all around us. So, nevertheless, our roots are monarchical, even though they're very mixed. One of the things I had to finally overcome was the idea that you heard a lot when I was a kid. America isn't a country, it's an idea. And we heard a lot. And what you might call the American civil religion was the real proof of whether or not you're an American. I came to realize that isn't true at all. In fact, that the death of that civil religion is what brought about wokery. In the sense that for a lot of people, if America wasn't the greatest thing going, the last best hope of mankind, the shining city on the hill, well, then obviously it was born in genocide and built in slavery. The idea that neither of those are true, and that we should love it because it's where we were born or where we came to, we love it because it's our country. Not because of the form of government, not because of the Constitution, but simply because it is what it is, what it is. You don't love your parents or cease to love them, depending on whether or not your dad is Man of the Year and your mother was Miss America. You love them because they're your parents. Full stop. Well, so it is with America. So the way I reconciled my monarchism with my patriotism was just that, was to realize that at the end of the day, there was no real contradiction between them. Now, I'm afraid I've taken it a bit of a step further. I think that if the country is going to survive, we need somehow to build for everyone a patriotism that is not based upon the American exceptionalism that I was raised with, but that is realistic and is based upon the country that we actually have.
That was very eloquently put. Let's see. So, does anyone? Oh, actually, John did show up, so I will ask him this question as well. Hello. So, introduce yourself, John.
Hello, I'm John.
Hi, John. Okay.
Hi, John. All right, so we should applaud at this point.
Yeah.
This is
Monarchist
great. I'm going to an AA
Anonymous.
meeting. Yeah. Monarchist
It's been a while.
My name is Charles, and I'm a monarchist. Hi,
Hi,
Charles.
Charles.
Monarchist Anonymous.
Yes. It's a MA. Let's see. There's MMA. Why not MA? All right. So,
What do you want,
John.
Charles? What do you want to ask me?
Okay. John, are you ready for the question?
Sure.
All right. What was the most difficult argument against monarchism for you to overcome before you became a monarchist?
Golly. I guess the one thing that trying to think, because like when I became a monarchist, I was already pretty disillusioned with like I was a conservative, but like not politically so. Like I wasn't a Republican at that point, so there wasn't really anything stopping me from being a monarchist. I just like fell right into it with how much I love history, how much I like. It was much easier for me to embrace it than somebody who I don't like. I guess the one thing that I took very seriously was the idea of like, what about bad monarchs, and what about how do we minimize that? That's kind of the thing I take very seriously in regards to being a monarchist. Like, how do we tackle that? But there wasn't really anything stopping me from being a monarchist, if that makes sense. Just things that within monarchy that I take more seriously, and I'm like, hey, we need to tackle this, and what are the ideas behind that, and how do we perfect monarchism? That's kind of like it's more so about making it in my mind better than saying it's more like solving a problem than it is like detracting me from monarchism, because of if any system is flawed, you don't want to like destroy the system, you want to improve upon it. And that's how I feel about monarchism. If there's any problems that need to be solved, we need to solve them. And that's kind of the thing I adopted. But I do remember watching videos upon videos when I started down this path about like what 3 years ago. 3 years ago was around there about. And I watched Charles's videos, and really Charles is the only YouTube channel. Tumblr House was the only YouTube channel with answers. There wasn't, how you have Catholic answers, and like YouTube channels that are apologists for Catholicism or apologists for this and that. There wasn't a lot of apologists for monarchy, and I would find like videos here and there, but really once I got a hold of it, with how much I enjoyed history, how much I enjoyed my Catholic faith that was budding at the time, I kind of just latched onto it pretty easily. I didn't have I was still very conservative. I've always been very conservative, but my conservatism has always been rooted in like social conservatism. So I never really became a libertarian. I never really did anything like that. I was more so socially. So that wasn't an issue to me. I wasn't a hardcore libertarian who were like, that type of thing. Even though I would listen to people like that, I never really bought fully into the small government mindset. So the government wasn't an issue to me. I just the big thing was having a virtuous monarch, and that was basically it. But it never really detracted me from monarchism.
All right. So, that was a very. So that's great that we all have that our boss man is here. See, he was another person who's been on several episodes of the podcast. If that wasn't obvious, and now we can use him in the bingo card.
Yay!
Yay! You'll find a bingo card, John, in the thing to
Bingo
use.
card.
Yes, in the conference text chat. Has anyone been keeping score yet?
I have. So
All right,
far.
let us know how you're doing using.
I mean, I only have like the free space and then one other one right now. So
Okay, well, tell us if we strike.
and
bingo.
I mean, like some of them we can't fill out, like the Wi-Fi one, and the Dante showing up.
Well,
we might be able.
let's
There's
get
still time.
let's get to question 2.
The afternoon/night is still young. All right, question number the second. Let's see, which one do I want to go with here? Okay, so assuming that you could pick a monarch from the past to come and try to sort out this country now, who would it be and why? You know, even though this isn't particularly realistic, and I guess you could say which qualities would you be looking for, but we'll just try to be able to a single person.
And of course, we will take Jesus Christ out of consideration for that.
Oh,
dang, you really got to do that to us.
Everybody.
There goes my answer right down the tubes. Thanks.
Well, all right. Although he's still
Thanks for
currently
that.
reigning. Well, okay. So monarch from the past, so who's dead. So okay. So we're going in order again. So Prussian.
It's a really hard question, honestly, and I'm not 100% sure because I have an idea of the person, but the reasoning behind it, I'm not 100% sure. Like I'm saying this because I really, really like him and I greatly respect him. Michael of Romania.
That's interesting.
Mainly because he's only the first one I can really think of right now. And I just thought he was probably one of the greatest modern monarchs ever.
Is like the picture of him loading a gun.
Yeah.
I love that picture.
Him just, well, time to deal with the fascists.
He really, if he did take the job, if anybody next to Kaiser Karl was the king of taking guff, it was Michael. God bless and rest him. He was,
yeah,
and he needed. Can you imagine being stuck without Congress as your parliament?
No, God.
I don't.
Oof.
I've met a congressman before. I met my congressman, and from what he talks about, from what he told me, it's just, ooh.
Well, what I love about my congressman is occasionally he'll send out a survey to us, right? But the survey is very much from the liberal point of view. Like, what do you want to see? Like, more healthcare access, more this, more big, it's not, hey, how am I doing? How do you feel about controversial issue? It's always worded in such a way as to make you try to support the liberal position. So you always have to use the blank space at the bottom that he so generously gives us.
So,
He never includes, would you like to see me dismembered publicly or something like that?
No, that's people might take him up on that one. No, I don't know. I wouldn't want to see him dismembered because that's kind of gross. But no.
So when I was about 8, I actually sat through a session of Congress in the North Dakota legislation because my grandfather was still legislature there. He was in there for 32 years under the Republican Party, and he was even House Speaker for a term, which was pretty hilarious. But I just remember it being boring, and just literally my grandfather also fell asleep during one session.
I just want to say I went to this North Carolina state legislature. I yelled at a politician there.
That's pretty basic.
And the best part was it was the leader of the Republicans.
We could tell that you're not King Michael.
Let's see. Darth?
So I had a call when you were explaining the question. What was it?
Okay, so which monarch? So a dead monarch from the past. So you can't. Would you bring back to or bring forward in time, I guess, to try to sort out our issues in the present in America right now. Like, just give them power, say, here's the deal, fix this.
And it can't
Ooh.
be Jesus.
Well, yeah.
Because he's still alive.
Okay, that's a tough one because I have so many monarchs that I personally love. But the one that I say that I love the most is honestly Kaiser Wilhelm II, even though he was a Protestant and I'm a pretty devout Catholic, I still respect the last German emperor. And I truly believe that if he would have not been interfered with by his ministers, he would have actually done a lot better as a monarch than he could have with the abilities that he had. And I believe that his vision for Germany at the time, I mean, if we're going to apply this to America, like you could kind of say like Germany and America were like twin countries. Like they had like the state system in Germany is like actually more autonomy than the state system in America, I believe, at the time. And I just think that he would have done well as like American emperor.
All right. I guess for me, sorry I had to bring a third Charles into this, but I'm going to say Charles the First of England and Scotland and Ireland and their empire across the seas, because he was a man who we know for a fact was willing willing to stand up to his parliament and always stuck to what he knew was true, even if that meant it meant his head in the end. So someone who he knew what needed to be done, and he was willing to go about it for the sake of the realm. And also, I recently, I guess, sort of maybe to solidify my answer, I don't know exactly why I did it. I started to read some of the letters that were written between what was Pope Gregory the 15th, or
Yeah.
some Pope the 15th,
Yeah,
and
Gregory.
Pope Gregory the 15th, and Charles the First, and it really is one of those interesting what ifs of history. If King Charles had actually managed to win the Civil War, made Cromwell and the rest of them shut up before it actually went underway, if he actually could have reunited the Anglicans and brought them back into communion with Rome, but no, I mean he seems like a very I think that he would be a very good choice, given that if we're just assuming that nothing else changes except for yeeting the office of the president and putting a monarch in its place, uh, or his place, then I think that he would have to deal with our Congress like he had to deal with his Parliament. So and he had the resolve to do it. And he may go bald pulling out his hair, but he could do it.
Charles the First versus Nancy Cromwell Pelosi.
Oh no,
I
no.
thought-
Okay. That's an insult to Crom.
Well,
I
Does that-
personally call her Nancy D'Alessandra Pelosi.
no, that's a Baltimore thing. No, I mean, she I don't know, I don't know. Now that I had to make that comparison of Cromwell to Pelosi, I don't really know what to think, because on the one hand, because you're sort of biased in that respect, right? Because
Cromwell had integrity of sorts.
well, I was going to say that we live with Pelosi now, so you're obviously going to be, if you're dealing with two things that you don't like, but one's from the past and one's from the present, I think you're going to be predisposed to disliking the thing you live with now, as opposed to disliking the thing you never had to live with.
Sure.
So I don't know. Maybe that's why. I don't know. I would have to think about that more and do a little more reading. But
Cromwell was a Puritan. Puritans are Calvinists, and that's pretty up there.
Puritanism. It's seeing all those. Yeah. Well, once you learn that story, the Puritans came over here to seek religious freedom.
Oh my!
No, it was freedom for their own religion to persecute. It's
Yeah.
not, the statement is not completely wrong, but it's
Well,
not completely
You're
right.
It's wrong by omission.
First thing you learn. Like, it was like, freedom to do what? Like,
Espouse heresy.
Yes, and then once you add that double predestination, and then they come across a bunch of Indians, it doesn't end. It doesn't end well.
I still find it really ironic though that they were the ones who colonized New England, and you look at New England now.
Well,
Yes.
that's the direct result
Ironic.
of
Of
Puritanism
Irish
decaying into-
immigration.
Oh, well, I was going to say the direct results of Puritanism decaying into Unitarianism. But okay, I think I've taken up enough time. Vic, who would you bring back?
Well, I have to throw out my first answer because he technically was not a monarch. And
Who
that
was
would be William Wallace.
wow.
But my actual answer is actually going to be the
If you need more time, just say so.
Louis the 14th.
Oh,
The Sun King. Nice.
Yes.
The Ancient regime king.
Yes,
I think I see it, but go ahead.
I'd love to see how he would react to our current Congress.
Wait, don't forget, he had to deal with the front. And if nothing else, our Congress is sort of permanent front, always there.
Yes.
it's always watching you, Mike Wazowski. Always watching.
Yeah, I just find it would be very interesting to see a guy who said, "I am the Senate,"
He said, "I am the
have,
state."
have to deal with a legislative body that is a little too bloated for its own good.
My only problem with Louis XIV being that he was the guy who built Versailles is he might be a little too financially irresponsible given the current state of U.S. and how it spends money. Like, I feel like
Okay.
it would blow even more of our budget on some weird vanity project.
Well, okay. This is where I have to disagree, because I think that his financial irresponsibility, if you want to call it that, was nowhere near as proportionally bad than our government's financial irresponsibility. And at least his financial irresponsibility had a nice looking building, well, a few nice looking buildings actually, because Versailles isn't just one building out of it. And and everything looked nice when he was, what he was building, as opposed to Congress, where, well,
I was going to say, I'd love to see what the builder of Versailles would do at the White House.
Yeah.
let's see.
And he would completely tear it down and start afresh.
Well, I think the White House. Maybe I just seen this as the cover of. Since I have the Star Spangled Crown, so naturally I'm kind of familiar with the cover of it. I don't know. I think that the White House itself would do pretty nice as a ready-made residence for a monarch. It looks stately and aristocratic, and it's. Although wasn't it based off the old Irish? It was based off. So I think I want to say it was based off the old Irish Parliament House, but I'm not too sure on that.
They were somewhat connected. Holman, the first architect, was an Irishman from Dublin. And there does seem to be a sort of inspiration there. Plus, today the old Parliament House is the Bank of Ireland, which is also kind of a fitting state for the White House in a sense.
Leon, you're up next.
So, I mean, when I was with all the time I had to think about it, certain names came up to me like Peter the Great of Russia and the Meiji Emperor of Japan. But I think in the context, especially for America, the best monarch to take control now would be Octavian Augustus of Rome, considering he's the one who turned the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire, and all the rows.
Oh, he has experience in that respect.
The man took control of the Senate, albeit by like force, and he was able to stabilize the society, the economy, expand Rome's political borders to take over some of the barbarian tribes. I mean, he just did everything that it's like again in a parallel that was wrong with Rome back then and fixed it. So why not, if especially if America and Rome has similar problems today, why wouldn't he be able to do the same thing with America and to an extent?
All right. Well,
I would have to. Well, that depends. Are
On
we
what?
consider Napoleon to be a proper monarch or
No.
no? Because I know that's controversial.
no.
I mean,
Well,
under the
a resident historian Vincent is actually listening live. So, Vincent, if you want to put an answer in conference text chat to that question, feel free to do so.
So I would my comment on that is the Congress of Vienna, and the War of the Coalitions. They did consider Napoleon as a monarch. That's why they didn't have him executed, because they weren't going to sponsor regicide.
And I believe
Since
he was a member of Sardinian nobility, I think, or Corsican nobility.
Minor,
yes,
very
Corsican.
minor.
Nobility. So I mean, he was royal. He had some
He
noble.
was aristocratic. Yes.
He probably didn't have a claim to the French throne, but I mean, he was a royal head of France. That makes sense.
I mean, it'd be considered imperial, not royal, but
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, because we like answers on this show. Why don't we have more
So,
answers per question? Let's consider
Vincent
him
is.
both yes and no. So you
So,
can say it.
according to our resident historian, Napoleon is a monarch
Well,
for the purposes of this question. So, go ahead, Will.
If that's the case, then yeah, I would definitely say Napoleon, because much like Augustus, he's very good at handling politicians and the more seedy parts of Republican governments. But in the case of Napoleon, he specifically is more suited with dealing with the sheer factionalist political turmoil that seems to be plaguing our country right now, as that's what was plaguing the country of France when he came to power. And so I think he would bring much more of the skill we need for our particularly ideologically charged conflict that plagues America today than the more, I guess you could say, instability that plagued the Roman Empire at its beginning.
all right.
So,
Hmm.
boss
John?
man.
I would have to say, after having a long time to think about this, Emperor Justinian the Great. I would have to say, because he did a lot of reform. He almost got back the Roman Empire, and plus he was a really good saint, and he's Eastern, so I'm kind of biased there, kind of with Charles. That's
Well,
me. So yeah, Emperor Justinian the Great. He almost brought back the empire, and his reforms are much needed, especially now, constitutional reforms and whatnot. And he dealt with a lot of strife with heresies and stuff like that, the cops and whatnot. So I have to go with Emperor Justinian. I have others, but if we're going non-monarchical, if they were to become a dynasty, or if he would have said yes to being the king, I would have to go with George Washington if we're going with like American rulers. But I don't know.
Mr. Coulombe?
We don't have anything. So.
Well, I think if it was a question of a sovereign who really fit who we are as a people now, it would probably be Caligula. But well, to someone who was like what we've become. But someone to really sort us out. Actually, there are a number of really good suggestions tonight. But I would say Charles V, the emperor.
Oh, yeah.
But simply
Ooh.
because he had a very definite vision of what he wanted to accomplish from the very beginning. Number one. Number two, he was sort of derailed because he faced this, what's the word, simultaneous opposition from the French, the Turks, and the Protestants. That's a lot. I think it was just a question of him in Congress. I'd bet on him.
All right, so Charles York, question 3.
All right, let's see. Okay, let's go with your question, actually, Vic. What is the biggest accomplishment American monarchists can accomplish in the next 5 years? Or Prussian, what do you think is the greatest thing we could do in 5 years?
I guess let's say gather more support. Like I don't think we'd trying to figure out how to word this. I don't think we would. I'm not sure. I don't know how to say this though. I'm sorry. All I can really say right now is just gather more support. Then I guess.
So you don't think that I would, if I ran on a monarchist platform, I could get elected to my city council? At least I'm not the other guys.
Okay. Listen. On a monarchist platform, no. On a platform that includes monarchism, maybe.
Well,
I mean, it's not like it matters on the city level
monarchism
anyways,
isn't
but...
an ideology, so
yeah.
You would have to be. It'd be like a social conservative platform with a little part in the party manifesto tucked in the back saying our ultimate goal is the establishment of a monarchy over the American empire.
I went to a Republican like meeting in which I met like a bunch of them, my state representatives and stuff, and I talked with some of them. And afterwards, I met a guy who was representing Trey Allen, who's running for our Supreme Court. And the guy was like genuinely interested in the idea of an American monarchy. And of course, this guy also has the ear of a guy who's probably going to become a Supreme Court justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court. So, putting that forward.
Maybe we can get like their state constitution amended from having a governor to having a monarch.
Okay. North Carolina.
We would have to run into. We would run into the issue of the nobility clause of the U.S. Constitution.
Everyone else is ignoring the Constitution. Why can't we?
Yes.
We'll talk. I'll talk about North Carolina Supreme Court later if we're able to get to it, because it was something I did want to talk about, but we'll get to that later then.
Okay. Darth.
What was the question again?
What do you think is the greatest thing that American monarchists can accomplish within the next 5 years?
Within the next 5 years, I mean, I would say honestly, like just making like coordinated efforts with multiple different monarchist sympathizers, intellectuals, groups, etc., within the states to at least get it out there. That way, like social conservatives that are disillusioned with the United States and its system can, instead of falling into ruts like say nationalism and
or becoming supporters of the absolute nut job that is crap, what's that guy, the racist guy, heaven's sakes, what is his name?
Richard Spencer.
No, not Richard Spencer. It's like the other one. The like he's young. He's
Fuentes.
Yeah, Fuentes, that guy. Like make sure they don't fall into that kind of rut.
I mean, it's funny because like Fuentes also does say we need a monarchy in America, which is, but
he's cringe though.
I mean, yes, he's cringe, but I do still believe that his heart is in the right place, even if he can't express it properly, and if he has some weird ideas floating up in there as well. I will give the benefit of the doubt to almost I will give the benefit of a doubt to almost anyone though. That's just
he is like actually racist.
But yes, just essentially like building these like connections, getting this out there, destroying the boomer truth that is essentially the post Nuremberg world that America's been perpetuating. Like that's what the goal should be. And whether that's like also like non-monarchist groups as well that are just like socially right wing, that would be like sympathetic. Just coordinating.
Yes. I guess for me, I think that obviously there's the organizing and yada yada yada, but I think what would really put us on the map is being attacked by mainstream media. Even if it's just one segment, you can dust off the VCRs, you can slot in that old blank tape. You can record that, put it in your treasured memory box. A 3-minute hit piece on us on NBC. That
CNN, MSNBC, like any of them.
like that. I think that us getting 5 minutes of fame because one of us accidentally said something on Twitter that became stupidly popular. I think that
Will.
well with his now that's a great now
I,
that's a,
I only said Will just because you're the one who like always
well
posts
he's the one
on
who runs the
Twitter.
Twitter. I
Maybe
run
that's the only reason I said that, Will.
he runs the Twitter. I run the Gab. Remind me to publish something on the Gab because I've been doing it once a day on weekdays. But anyways, yeah,
Well, I don't have to be the only one who runs the Twitter, but y'all don't give me anything.
well,
Oh.
Well, it's
It's
well,
Twitter,
it's
okay?
not
It's
it's
Twitter.
not laziness. No, okay, I don't know. But yeah, no, yeah, that's the yeah. I mean, just I mean, us because us being popular, and of course, there's always this mentality of if the media hates it, then it must be good. So maybe people would see that and say, if the media really hates them, then maybe they must be really cool. But it may cause people to explore, even if they can get over that American mentality of what monarchist in the United States. All
well,
right.
I think Vincent kind of took my answer, so I am actually going to use it. So sorry, Vincent, for that. In 5 years, we have to they don't have to like us. The American people should know that we exist. Even if they don't like us, they should have to know we exist, and we have to put some type of effort into doing that.
We
And
have
that is
propaganda
on.
posters.
Yeah. All right, Leon.
I mean, a lot of good suggestions have already come up, mostly winning a local election.
Oh
But
yeah.
no, I agree that we need to be in 5 years' time. We need to consolidate our power within like the and just like with parties so that we become a household name, like you said. So we have more clout and all.
All right, well,
I kind of agree with what everyone else was saying about the whole we need to be relevant within 5 years. If we can't gain relevance in 5 years, then the experiment might just be failed. I don't want to say that for certain, but yeah, we definitely need to be relevant within 5 years.
Well, there
Bossman.
was an American. I think it still exists. There was an American monarchist party formed in the 70s or 80s. So it may just need a couple false starts of several new generations of people before somebody finally gets it right. But because I mean, monarchism has never been mainstream in this country, but there's been at least I'm going to wager there's been at
Oh,
least three.
monarchism was very much me. I would challenge you there. Monarchism was very much mainstream in the mid 1700s.
Well, since after America became a nation, and the generation of Tories who weren't tarred and feathered away, died off. Um, monarchism. I still think I wouldn't be surprised if there were small groups of American monarchists, but looking at all their neighbors, they kind of thought that they were the only ones. But now that we have the internet, we're able to organize across, the entire country as opposed to. Uh, Small town,
Yeah.
small
Yeah,
state.
well, small town low nut thing. All right, boss man.
I would say, 5 years for movements, as far as movements go, like as far as like intellectual movements, uh, ideally, I would want us to be on being pretty conservative with my assessment. I would want us to be on the periphery of society. I would want us to be, if not a household name, um, contenders culturally, like be there, be present, because the more we're present and the more we haven't been like suppressed or anything like that, the better. I would want us to, because that's the initial goal, getting monarchy acceptable in America is the big thing. Like having it be a contender when somebody says, "Oh, what's your ideal system?" When I would want, if somebody asked me that, or if somebody asked anybody that, I would want them to be able to say monarchism without uh, without
Without looking around and making sure nobody else is listening in on the
yeah.
conversation.
I would want that to be, as far as like short-term goals, as far as like conservative goals. I would say that that's pretty important to have to just be able to openly be a monarchist in America, and other people saying, okay, that's acceptable. That would be a big
Well, alright. Yeah, and of course, the people don't have to necessarily like us, like Vincent
yeah
said. They just have to know we're here and we exist. All right,
yeah be like,
Mr.
hey, you
Coulombe.
know?
Well, I would add something rather different, but I think it's important and something that's been on my mind for a long time. And that is, I think we need to do a much better job of exposing the monarchical roots of our country, especially on the local level. So I'll give you an example. How many here have heard of the missions of California?
Me.
Yes,
All right.
I
How many
have.
here are aware that they were funded by the King of Spain?
Yes.
Here.
Here.
All right. Most people don't know that. That's the kind of factoid that needs to be gotten out. All of our state governments, take North Carolina as an example, for those of us who are North Carolinian. You've got places like Tryon's Palace, Moores Creek Bridge, where the Loyalists fought, all these kinds of things. Those things have to be brought out much more to the public mind, and their direct connection with the crown emphasized. Because they, as a rule, they aren't, or if they are, it's kind of slighting, you know. They don't realize it's part of a bigger picture. So, for instance, just to pull a rabbit out of a hat, any number of old Episcopal parishes in the Eastern Seaboard are very proud to boast of the fact that they've got a chalice and paten donated by Queen Anne. But there are a lot of them, and that's because that was a big deal for Queen Anne.
Yes.
Was sending this stuff to or another, my personal favorite as a Catholic. Have any of you ever heard of the Leopoldine Society, the Leopoldinen Stiftung?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, it was founded in 1829. It was an organization located here in Austria, with the emperor as the president, continued until 1914. And between the Habsburgs and donations from people all over the empire, they literally dumped millions of dollars into the church in America. And they paid for the education, transport, and often continued sustenance of people like St. John Neumann and Bishop Braga. I'll bet you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. St. John Neumann is a very important figure in my parish's history.
Indeed, he is, and he's well known. But what's not well known is that he was funded by the Habsburgs.
Wow, I did not know it. I'll have to bring that up on Sunday.
Well, this is my point. There are all sorts of things like this, tons, that are hiding in plain sight, as it were. And depending on where you are and where you live, I mean, it's less likely in Montana, although you've got the Hudson's Bay Company out there. But in most of our states, there's something. And
You brought up the Episcopal churches. I think that the famous historical one in Annapolis is St. Anne's Episcopal Church. I imagine they have a patent donated by Queen Anne, but I've never visited.
Well, they sure do, and that's a very big point to bring out, is the fact that they do indeed. And in Baltimore, you've got St. Alphonsus Church, where St. John Neumann was, and they got money out of the Habsburgs. So there's a lot of this kind of thing. You just have to look for it.
And if we consider Native American chieftains and such to be monarchs too, which personally I do, we can even expand that history further back to pre-Columbian times even.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that the American Indians tended to be monarchical is, well, it's very, very true.
I know Tecumseh was a very big thing in Ohio, and for those of you who are very well versed about the history around the War of 1812.
Well, yeah, but in Ohio, for instance, the Dominican Priory at Somerset was funded by Fernando VII of Spain.
I didn't realize the Spanish had a presence in Ohio. We were using France.
Well, they did. The Dominicans set up shop there in the early 1800s while Ferdinand was still king in Spain. And he gave them a chalice, which unfortunately was stolen a few years ago. But at any rate, these are things that are known on the local level. But when you look at them and you make a study of them, you realize that they're part of a much bigger picture, which we've been able to completely ignore.
Was incredibly eye-opening and enlightening. Some of that stuff hyper local to me. I go into one of those churches you mentioned every single Sunday, and I didn't even know that. Nor I think does anyone else in that parish that typically goes there, or at least not anybody that's not exactly a senior citizen that would have known about it. But of course, anyways, Charles York, let's get to the next question.
All right. Yes. Let's see. All right. So we have a question from Charles. Not me. Let's see. What is the most monarchical part of the United States government today regarding its origins?
You see, along the lines of my suggestion.
I
Come on, Preston. You haven't gotten any time to think this episode. I don't apologize.
it's you're only doing this because I'm a Southern Baptist.
No, I'm doing this because yes. No, I'm joking. I have nothing against Southerners. I mean, my cousin's marrying one, so. Anyways, I don't approve. No, I'm joking.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Well, if you think of something, interject when I move on to another person. So, Darth.
I mean, the closest thing I can see as like being monarchical, I mean, it would be things like small little things, like say, why do we call our districts in a state a county? Why do we refer to them as that when they're held by a council?
Everybody but Louisiana.
Well, yeah, but then also like you can kind of say like military officers, because by their nature they have to be aristocratic. That's kind of like an aristocratic elite within the United States. What else? I mean, just small things like that. But those are the only things I can really think of off the top of my head.
I guess those are good answers because there are a lot of things, elements of the United States government where the terminology and even some of the function of how it works is a holdover from the old British days. Like the fact we call them counties and the common law, as much as we've eroded that over the years. But if we're talking about the federal government, then I mean, the idea of one man holding a great deal of power, the obvious example would be the president, but the president doesn't function like a monarch in the deeper sense of, because the two have completely different modus operandi, or not, well, modus operandi, and they also have, two different goals, whereas a king is naturally concerned about his would naturally be concerned about the future of the kingdom, and if he was being selfish, then his dynasty. Whereas a president is concerned about making sure that he, or at least his party, wins the next election cycle. So, which is a little bit more short term. But I mean, the institution of courts, deciding on things. I think that, of course, because separation of powers isn't very monarchical as we have it. So I can't really think of anything specifically that is monarchical in our federal government. But I can think of a lot of things that aren't, like separation of powers, because typically a monarch would have influence in all areas of power, even if he wasn't directly active in it. But Vic,
Just say the the presidency. The presidency, because look at all the power that the president currently holds right now, and just think he's essentially an elected monarch that has to answer to the legislature.
well, right now the president doesn't have to answer to the legislature. The legislature answers to him.
Oh, yes.
With what was it? I think somebody said that if we can't get, I think it was Nancy Pelosi that said, if we can't get climate, activism, or this was months ago when Biden first took office, or over a year ago, I guess. If we can't get, climate legislation or things like that done through Congress, the president should just issue an executive order. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
All right,
You know what?
Leon, go ahead.
Surrendering.
Come back to me on this.
Okay, Will.
Everyone's already said president, and that's what I was going to say, so I ain't got anything. I'm sorry.
All right, boss man.
Lee, it jumped quick to me. All right. I would say in my home state, it's very much influenced. At least the local laws are influenced by Spanish, the Spanish codes and French laws. So that I would say basically anything that wasn't devised in 1776, that wasn't devised when the nation became like its own independent entity, that's monarchical. Governors are monarchical. Basically every other government structure aside from that was created in the first Constitution, or the Articles of Confederation in the Constitution, it's all monarchical. Like if you strip back the current government we have, it's all there. Like British common law, the various law influences that came into existence during colonialism. It's all like it's a few layers away, like the founding fathers really just built on top of a monarchical institution, a lot of monarchical institutions, and said, okay, this is a republic now, but everything underneath of it, like everything in the engine, is monarchical. Even the things that we insist aren't, like what you guys said, the presidency. A lot of the powers are just name changes. So like royal assent, the veto, all these powers that are quote unquote unique to the president were held by monarchs of the past. Like executive orders are just royal decrees, like whatever, like you name it, really. Like it's all like, and that's kind of like what I see federalism and others. It's just the reinvention of the wheel, and that wheel being monarchical institutions, feudalism. If you go back far enough, federalism is just kind of it's a cheap knockoff of subsidiarity and feudalism and stuff like that. So we're reinventing the wheel here. At least that's my opinion.
Well,
Coulombe?
those are all great answers, and each of them true in their way. But the very specific thing, it's only part of the federal structure by adoption,
Yeah.
and that is the National Guard.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Because the National
Never
Guard,
actually realized that. Yeah.
well, see, the National Guard, I mean, if you take Puerto Rico, they claim their lineage to the Spanish militia, founded in 1598. But the oldest Guard unit in the continental states goes back to 1636. And there are quite a number of them in the eastern states that go back between 1636 and 1774. One of my personal favorites, of course, is the 211th MP Battalion in Massachusetts, which was originally the first company of independent cadets, the Guard of the Royal Governor. And in Connecticut, to this day, you have the Governor's Foot Guards, the Governor's Horse Guards. They go back to colonial days. So there are quite a few other units like that. So it was a little bit of a trick question because obviously the National Guard itself was only created in 1905, but their oldest units go back to colonial days.
Well, that gave us a lot of food for thought there, Mr. Coulombe. Next question, Charles York.
All right, let me get the timestamp up. I think we're running out of serious questions, so we're going to have to start dipping into the.
And I'm afraid my time is beginning to shade. It's after 10 here. And
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
then we'll definitely have to get into some silly questions right now. Okay. This is more of a testing your knowledge. Actually, no. All right. So, okay, so the squad has assumed full control of the United States. You know, the squad from Congress with AOC and all that. Which one of them would you want to see as supreme leader if you had to pick?
Ugh.
Oh,
The Meteor.
why?
Can you repeat the question, please?
None of them.
Do you know you're familiar with the squad in Washington, AOC, and
Ilhan Omar,
Rashida
Tlaib.
Tlaib.
yes, they have assumed control of the government. Which one would you prefer to see as supreme leader if you had to pick between one of them?
I'd say Omar because she seems to be the most sensible out of all of those. Oh, people.
Okay. I mean,
I personally choose the Meteor, Mr. Coulombe.
I think of the squad, AOC, finita la commedia, let the whole thing collapse.
Just
Yeah,
burn the whole
that-
thing down. Yeah.
That's also my answer because AOC would just be an accelerationist person that would just tear down the institutions with her incompetence.
Well,
All right, next
this-
question, Charles.
well, no, hey, I have to give my answer. I have things to say. I don't know why, and this is not fair because she can't help it. I cannot stand AOC's voice. I mean, she can't help it. I just can't stand her voice. But so the concept of me having to listen to her as we're slaving away in in our green energy plants that we've been assigned to as a public works project, um, listening to her speeches, rousing the masses to throw down their shovels and cover their ears. I don't know. I mean, I would get some exercise in putting my hands over
Honest-
my head.
I know, Mr. Coulombe, you have to go. There is a question in the conference text chat that has been specifically addressed to you, so if you wouldn't mind answering, that it's from username The Devil of Bohemia. If you could change anything about the American economic system, what would it be? Would you change it to distributism, such as capitalism, or something else?
Oh, heavens. I'm not an economist.
Right.
Well, I think for starters, I think the biggest thing I would want to do is end the income tax and replace it with a federal sales tax or something of that sort. Mm.
So that, all right. So
Um,
do you have any final thoughts to us before you go, Mr. Coulombe, or?
I do indeed. I do indeed, and that is that it's very interesting for me to interact with a bunch of young monarchists simply because when I was your age, whether, and this is something that I don't think I'll ever really get an answer to, whether there really were a lot more of us, but just weren't in communication, or whether there are because of the magic of the internet. That's one question that's always been floating around. The other is that I do think the number of monarchists has grown as faith in the system we've inherited has shrunk. And this will sound perhaps odd, but that's kind of bittersweet for me in the sense that I'm very, very happy that young people are discovering for themselves what I consider to be eternal truths, shall we say, both in terms of religion and politics. The unfortunate thing, though, is that the country in which I was born, the world in which I was born, is gone beyond recall. And even when you know that that's not necessarily a bad thing in the long run, emotionally, it's not a lot of fun. It's an odd thing. When I was your age, when I was just getting out of college, things looked very, very bright. You know, the Reagan was just coming into the White House. It looked like a lot of the madness of the 60s was being put behind us. And a few years later, the Soviet Union fell. And that, I can tell you, was a joy to live through. But over the course of the following years, everything kind of turned to what we've got now. And so I'll leave you with the hope that when you're my age, things will look as bright as they did when I was your age.
That's something to think about. That's definitely something to think about. Like when we started this, it was just, we had no idea it was going to work and all this stuff. And well, if it's if your life is any indication that we might be the forebearers to a bigger generation of American monarchism, and that's all we can hope for.
You may well indeed. You may well indeed. And
We have to credit you in large part for basically keeping the flame alive for us. And give Vincent Franchini our regards when you record the Off the Menu podcast tomorrow, which is also put on YouTube. I believe on.
Hey, plugging things is my job. Let's see.
Is that a plug?
Oh, was that
oh yeah. You got me at my own game.
As a time to promote free shipping on orders of $30 or more.
Be the first on your block. Operators are standing by.
Mm-hmm.
But
also like don't donate to Tumblr House like I do every month. It's a small price to pay to get your answers, to get your questions answered by Mr. Charles Coulombe.
Well, it's. I'll tell you, gentlemen. I'm very grateful to be able to do it, and I'm glad that you're getting some profit from it. I can tell you that, the times seem very dark, but in some ways they always seem dark. There's always a problem. So never give up hope, and remember that this too shall pass. If we make it to heaven, this will be like a bad dream. It'll be the closest to hell we ever get. Of course, on the other hand, if we go to hell, well, it's kind of the closest to heaven we'll ever get. So let's not. Anyway, God bless you all, gentlemen, and thank you so much for having me.
Actually,
And-
I would actually think that there were only a couple questions left, so I think that actually we can that I think maybe better for another time. So actually, we can wrap up the whole thing now if nobody has any.
Absolutely. Mr.
Uh,
Coulombe, would you like to lead us in prayer?
oh well, I gotta do the plugging things first.
Sure.
All
In the
right.
Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. All
And the
right.
Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Oh,
Saint Louis, King of France, pray
Ora
for
pro
us.
nobis. Well, this has been a very relatively short but very fun episode of Monarchist Minute. You see, it is possible to have a large number of people and not have everything fall into chaos. But if you would like to join us live, we normally record at 8 p.m. Eastern Time in our Discord server, link in the description below. We also have various social medias, which we'll find in the links in the description below, and links to Tumblr House and Darth Kilhoun's YouTube channel will be in the description below. So if you somehow haven't heard of Tumblr House, now's the time to go over and subscribe, even though statistically speaking that's unlikely. So until next week, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America.